The sky over Portland was the color of wet concrete, and the soft hum of the radiator was the only sound in my little cottage. I had just finished stringing the last of the warm white lights around the tiny spruce in my living room. The smell of cinnamon from the candle on my windowsill filled the air. My fingers were sticky with tape from wrapping the few small gifts I'd prepared for my grandchildren, homemade cookies in tins, a hand-knit scarf, a paperback novel for Lacey that I thought she might like. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from Serena, my daughter-in-law. "Don't worry about gifts this year. We've got everything handled." I stared at the words, feeling a sting under my ribs. Last month, I wired them $5,000 to help with their mortgage. Nathan barely said thank you, and Serena sent a single thumbs-up emoji. I told myself it didn't matter, that I helped because I wanted to. But reading her message now, I felt like an outsider, like a guest in their life who should stay in her place. I set the phone down and walked to the window. A light drizzle tapped against the glass, blurring the outline of my dormant garden. My reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered, gray hair pulled back, eyes tired but sharp. I thought about the last time I had spent Christmas with them, 4 years ago. I'd baked 3 pies, wrapped gifts for everyone, and left the next morning without a single present, without even hearing my own name during the gift exchange. Invisible. The phone rang suddenly, cutting through the silence. I hesitated, then picked up. "Hi, Marcella," Serena said, voice sweet and bright. "We were just talking, and we'd love for you to come to Charleston for Christmas this year. Everyone will be there." I blinked, stunned, after years of being left out. Now an invitation. Something about her tone felt rehearsed, almost too careful, but I heard myself say yes. When the call ended, I opened the drawer of my side table and took out a small velvet pouch. Inside was the silver condo key and a folded paper packet, the quiet proof of the life I'd built on my own. I placed it gently in my suitcase beside the tins of cookies, feeling the weight of both my love and my resolve as I zipped the bag shut and reached for my coat. Ready to face the road ahead, I still remember my 70th birthday, as if it had been carved into me. The day started like any other. Rain slid down the window panes, and the smell of chamomile drifted from the cup I held between my hands. I'd hoped, even if I told myself I hadn't, that someone would call. Maybe Nathan, maybe one of the kids. I checked my phone every hour, then every few minutes. Noon came and went. By evening, the tea in my cup had gone cold. The mailbox outside was empty. No card, no text, not even an accidental emoji. I sat there in my kitchen, listening to the refrigerator hum and the clock tick, realizing that my life had quietly slipped out of theirs. It was a strange kind of grief, quieter than death, but sharp all the same. That night, as the light faded from the last candle on my table, I decided I wouldn't spend whatever years I had left waiting for their approval. Bitterness felt heavy, and I was already carrying enough. So, I opened my old laptop and typed in the words, "How to start a blog." The beginning was clumsy. Tutorials and strange new terms filled my evenings, but soon, something stirred inside me. I called my blog Second Horizon, a place for women like me, widows, grandmothers, women who knew how it felt to be invisible, to share strength. I wrote late into the night about grief, small joys, and starting again. Then came the journals. I learned how to make printable memory books and gratitude logs on Etsy. The first time an order came through, I clapped my hands in the empty kitchen. Soon, 50 orders became 100. My first $500 week felt like I'd found a secret part of myself no one could take away. Through all of this, I kept my silence. Not once did I tell Nathan or Serena. They didn't know I had also saved their home once, quietly sending a payment when the mortgage was past due. No thank you ever came. I closed my laptop one night and looked around my little cottage, the quiet now filled with purpose instead of loneliness. When the invitation to Charleston came, I knew I wasn't walking in as the same forgotten woman they left behind. The morning I left Portland, the sky was heavy and gray. I loaded my single suitcase and the basket of gifts into my old Subaru, slipping the velvet pouch into my handbag where I could feel its quiet weight. As I merged onto the highway, rain streaked the windshield in fine lines. I am going to smile and watch, I whispered to myself. No arguments, no begging for attention, just me, present, carrying the truth they didn't know existed. The miles rolled by in a blur of wet asphalt and pine. Somewhere along the way, the tension in my chest loosened into resolve. By the time I reached Charleston, the sky had cleared to a pale winter blue. Nathan and Serena's house stood sharp against the street, a modern white brick home with black shutters. 2 shiny SUVs in the driveway, and a plastic reindeer frozen mid-leap on the lawn. Serena opened the door before I knocked, her smile bright but thin. She leaned in for a quick hug, her perfume sharp and citrusy. Nathan followed with a one-armed squeeze, his eyes still half locked on his phone. The grandkids mumbled greetings without looking up from their tablets. Inside, the air smelled faintly of pine and lemon polish. A Christmas tree towered in the corner, draped with silver ribbon and glass ornaments, surrounded by gifts stacked in glossy towers. Not one of those boxes had my name. Serena led me upstairs to the guest room. Dust lined the dresser, and the thin floral bedding felt cold under my fingertips. I placed my suitcase on the floor and looked out toward the staircase. From the landing, I could see the glittering tree below, the ribbons catching the light. I ran my hand along the velvet pouch in my handbag and felt its solid weight. In a house full of glossy surfaces and polite distance, I knew exactly where I stood, and for the first time, that knowledge didn't make me shrink. I let the thought settle over me as night began to fall, and the house murmured with a life that had learned to move on without me. That night, the guest room felt colder than it should have. I lay on the floral comforter, staring at the ceiling, while the faint sound of laughter drifted up from downstairs. My hands rested over my stomach, and with every shallow breath, the memories crept back in, one after another, like they'd been waiting for me to sit still. I thought about the year Serena showed off their new espresso machine at Sunday dinner. Steam hissed, cups clinked, and she handed a perfect latte to everyone at the table except me. Then she glanced my way and said lightly, "You probably just want tea." "Right." I smiled and nodded, swallowing the small sting, pretending it didn't matter. Another memory followed close behind the summer. I suggested a weekend trip to the coast. I pictured the kids chasing seagulls and all of us walking along the water the way we used to. Serena told me they were too busy, and Nathan added that the kids had sports and lessons. I knew what it meant. I wasn't part of their picture anymore. I rolled to my side, the thin mattress squeaking, and reached into my coat pocket. My fingers closed around Ed's wedding band. Smooth and familiar, I carried it for courage. A little reminder of a life where love had been steady and unquestioned. I pressed it to my palm and whispered to the dark, this time, "I will not beg for space. I will bring my own light." I sat up and opened my handbag, pulling out the small velvet pouch. My thumb brushed the edge of the silver condo key inside, then the folded business report. The quiet proof of the world I had built my own, unshakable and invisible to them, downstairs. Laughter burst again, then faded to a murmur. I slipped the pouch back into my bag, feeling its weight anchor me. I no longer needed their table to feel whole. I pulled the thin blanket over my shoulders, and listened to the house settle for the night, my mind steady as I waited for morning and whatever came with it. The smell of cinnamon rolls and pine drifted through the air when I walked into the living room the next morning. The tree glimmered in the corner, so tall it nearly brushed the ceiling, every branch draped with silver ribbon and sparkling glass ornaments. Gifts blanketed the floor, stacked in neat, glossy towers like a photograph in a holiday magazine. I carried my cup of tea to the far end of the couch and eased down, quiet as the children hovered nearby, vibrating with excitement. Serena clapped her hands. "Okay, let's start." Her voice was bright, rehearsed, the sound of someone performing joy. The children dove into the pile, paper tearing, bows flying. Lacey squealed over a new MacBook. Her little brother unwrapped a gaming console and a smartwatch, grinning wide as Nathan snapped photos on his phone. Box after box passed through Serena's hands. A designer handbag for her, a sleek golf bag for Nathan. Candles and gadgets and toys piled higher and higher on the rug, while the space in front of me stayed empty. I smiled politely whenever anyone glanced my way, fingers warming around my teacup. Then Serena paused, scanning the tree with exaggerated surprise. "Oh no," she said with a little smirk. "We must have forgotten yours." The words slid through the room like a knife disguised as a joke. My grandson snickered. Granny's used to it. The room chuckled softly, casual, like my absence in their circle was a familiar punchline. I lifted the cup to my lips, letting the steam blur my face for a moment. On the surface, I looked unbothered, even amused. But inside, a steady calm anchored me. They didn't know that the woman sipping tea in the corner was no longer the one who once left this house in silent shame. I set my cup on the coaster and folded my hands in my lap, letting the laughter and rustle of paper swirl around me. Their world had no space for me, but I had built one of my own, and in a moment, I would remind them of it. I placed my teacup gently on the table and reached into my handbag. My fingers closed around the soft velvet pouch, its weight both familiar and powerful. Slowly, without hurry, I drew it out and set it on the coffee table. Conversation dimmed. Paper stopped crinkling. I unfastened the pouch and slipped out a folded packet of papers and a silver key. The room seemed to shrink as I laid them side by side. Neat and deliberate. Nathan frowned. "What's this?" I met his eyes calmly. "This," I said, touching the packet, "is the last quarter's report for Second Horizon. That's the little project I started after you stopped calling. It now has tens of thousands of readers, mostly women over 60. I sell journals, ebooks, and printable memory books. Last quarter alone, I earned $42,000. For a beat, no one moved." Serena's smile wavered, a small crack in her polished face. Lacey leaned forward, her tablet forgotten. "And this," I added, tapping the key, "belongs to my new condo in downtown Portland. I closed on it last week. 2 bedrooms, plenty of light. It's mine. Built from my own work." Nathan's mouth opened, then shut again. The younger kids finally glanced up, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Serena let out a short, awkward laugh. I didn't know you were doing all that," Nathan said quietly. "You never asked," I said, my voice steady. And I stopped waiting to be seen. The room felt different now, the weight of my words settling over the ribbon-strewn carpet. No one reached for another gift. The laughter that had filled the room just minutes ago was gone, replaced by a stillness that felt almost fragile. I leaned back, hands folded in my lap, feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one sitting in the corner, invisible. I was right here, and they couldn't look away. I sipped the last of my tea and watched them take in the new world I had placed on the table, knowing the silence wouldn't last for long. The silence stretched until Serena broke it with a sudden brightness in her voice. Well, this is incredible. Marcella, truly inspiring. Maybe we could work together on this. I've got years of marketing experience, and we could turn your blog into a whole brand. Nathan leaned forward, nodding quickly. She's right. Mom, we could help you scale this thing to 6 figures, maybe more. Ads, sponsors, collaborations, we could make it huge. I lifted my teacup and took a slow sip, letting their words hang in the air. I built this in the silence you left me in, I said finally. I don't need partners who arrive after the applause. Their smiles froze. I set my cup down and let the quiet fill the room again, heavy, but clean. My voice was steady as I continued, each word carrying years of weight. I called, and no one answered. I sent gifts, and they went unnoticed. I sat through holidays with an empty mailbox and a phone that stayed dark. That silence, your silence, became my fuel. I built something because I had to, not because anyone cheered me on. Nathan glanced down at his hands, the bravado slipping from his face. Serena crossed her arms, her bright performance faltering. From the couch, Lacey finally spoke, her voice soft but clear. I always knew you were cooler than they said. I turned to her, my heart warming at the simple honesty. She leaned into the arm of the couch, eyes wide with a mixture of pride and curiosity. In that small moment, I saw a bridge between my world and theirs, a reminder that not all doors were closed forever. The room settled into a quieter rhythm after that. No sales pitches or fake cheer. Just the faint crackle of the fireplace and the rustle of ribbon underfoot. I leaned back into the cushions, my shoulders loose, my tea cooling beside me, and let the truth sit where it belonged, right in the center of their perfect living room. By late afternoon, the laughter had faded into the low hum of television, and the smell of cinnamon and pine had grown heavy. I stood in the guest room, folding my clothes into neat stacks, sliding them into my suitcase with deliberate care. I had no reason to stay the night in a house that only opened its doors when curiosity outweighed affection. The floor creaked softly, and I turned to see Lacey standing in the doorway. She hesitated before stepping in, then wrapped her arms around me in a real hug. Warm and unhurried, I held her close, breathing in the faint scent of her shampoo. The simplest reminder of what love is supposed to feel like. I slipped a small envelope from my pocket and pressed it into her hand. A gift card. I said, your favorite bookstore. Use it for something you love, not what's required. Her eyes lit up, and she tucked it carefully into her hoodie. Thank you, Granny, she whispered. For a moment, it felt like the house had a heartbeat again. When I carried my suitcase downstairs, Nathan and Serena were waiting near the front door, shifting from foot to foot. Neither of them met my eyes right away. I smiled politely, adjusting the strap of my bag. Thank you for dinner, I said, my voice even and calm. I hope one day you find what I found, peace that doesn't need permission. Nathan's mouth twitched like he wanted to speak, but no words came. Serena forced a thin smile, the kind that never touched her eyes. I gave a small nod to both of them, then turned toward the door, outside. The winter air was crisp against my face as I lifted the suitcase into my Subaru. I felt lighter than I had in years, the weight of expectation finally gone. As I drove away from the perfect house with its glossy tree and cold walls, the road opened wide in front of me, carrying me back toward the life I had built with my own 2 hands. By the time I pulled into Portland, evening had draped the city in soft gray. Snow drifted past the street lamps, catching the light like falling stars, and the quiet hum of downtown wrapped around me as I parked in front of my new condo. I carried my suitcase up the short flight of stairs, each step a small reminder of how far I had come. Inside, warmth greeted me. I slipped off my coat, set the kettle on the stove, and lit a single candle on the table near the window. The faint scent of vanilla filled the room. Outside, snowflakes clung to the glass, and I watched them for a moment, letting the peace sink into my bones. I opened my laptop and logged into my blog, the familiar blue glow lighting my face. The post I had drafted days ago waited in my dashboard, the gift I gave myself. I added the last line with a steady hand, describing the moment I chose my own worth over someone else's approval. Then I hit publish. The responses began almost immediately. Notifications pinged as comments flowed in messages from women in Ohio, Arizona, Alberta, each one thanking me for saying the thing they felt but couldn't voice. I cried, reading this. I thought I was the only one forgotten. You gave me hope. As I sipped my chamomile tea, warmth spread through me. Not from the drink, but from the connection. My worth wasn't in a box under a tree or a name on a gift tag. It was here, in the lives I touched quietly, in the space I carved out for myself when no one else would. Then my inbox chimed again. This time, it wasn't a comment. It was an email from a producer at the Second Start, a national podcast highlighting people who reinvent themselves later in life. They wanted to feature me, to let me share my story with listeners across the country. I leaned back in my chair, the candle flickering beside me, and felt something lift inside. My life was no longer waiting in someone else's shadow. It was reaching far beyond the walls of my own home by the time spring arrived. The city had shaken off its winter gray, and sunlight spilled through my condo windows in warm, golden streaks. My living room had transformed into a small classroom once a week, filled with women who carried the same quiet weight I once knew. They arrived with notebooks and nervous smiles, and I guided them through the basics of email lists, online shops, and digital journals. Watching them click publish for the first time felt like watching tiny lanterns rise into the night sky. Lacey came for spring break, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder and her laptop under her arm. She dove into my work as if she'd been waiting for this all along, helping me format a new journal series and organize product photos. We spent hours at the kitchen table, our tea mugs leaving little rings on the wood, sharing ideas and laughter that felt light and real. One afternoon, I paused by the window, the same kind of window I had once stared through, waiting for a call that never came. The spring breeze nudged the curtain, and I whispered to myself, I was invisible in their house, but now I am seen in my own world. The next day, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. A glossy card with embossed lettering. Nathan and Serena were inviting me to Christmas, complete with a smiling family photo in front of their tree. I held it for a moment, then set it on the counter and typed a simple reply. Thank you, but I've already made plans with people who see me that weekend. My mentorship circle gathered in my living room. The air buzzed with the sound of women discovering new corners of themselves, and laughter rippled around the table. I looked at their faces, at Lacey grinning over her first completed design, and felt a warmth that filled every space that had ever been empty. I turned back to the group, joined their laughter, and felt the certainty settle in my chest. This was the life I built, and it was finally fully mine.